Hello, everyone. I'll start again. Just been told I was on mute after 2 years, still managed to make that error. Anyway, good afternoon to everyone. I'd like to welcome you to the 6th webinar in our Advocates and Allies series, working in the digital space. My name's Carmel Tebbutt, and I'm the CEO of the Mental Health Coordinating Council. I'd like to begin by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land on which we're meeting. For me, that's the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation, and I'd like to pay respects to elders past, present and emerging. I'd also like to acknowledge the contribution of people with the lived experience of mental health conditions to mental health reform in Australia. MHCC started these webinar series, Advocates and Allies, because we wanted to bring something to frontline workers in the community managed mental health sector about how the broader mental health service system worked. We've found them extremely popular. For example, for today, we had over 100 people register to attend this webinar. So just to run through today's format, we'll be first of all hearing from 2 Mental Health Coordinating Council member organisations about how they've responded to the evolving environment during the COVID-19 pandemic, including the challenges and the opportunities. We've all had to get used to working in a different way in the last 2 years. We've all had to get a lot more used to using online technology, although you wouldn't necessarily think that from the start of today's webinar. And really today's webinar is about exploring what that means for mental health service delivery and best practice in that space. So after we hear from our 2 member organisation representatives, we're then going to have a panel discussion, and we'll then finish by launching our brand new digital service delivery guide. So we're due to finish at 3:15 p.m. The webinar is being recorded, so if you can't stay with us for the entire time, you'll be able to access the website the webinar later from the MHCC website. So I'd now like to introduce all of our speakers who are on screen with me now. First of all, we've got Joe Young from Grow. We've got Phoebe Connors from Uniting. We've got Sigrid Staender-Challender, a lived experience expert. And we've got Corinne Henderson, the Principal Policy Advisor at MHCC. So welcome to all our speakers. Thanks very much for being with us today. So we're now going to move into the first part of the proceedings. And so I'd ask everyone other than Joe to turn off their cameras, because Joe's going to give us a presentation. So I'd like to introduce Joe Young. Joe is an online program worker with the Grow Mental Wellbeing Services and comes from Bundjalung country in northern New South Wales. With lived experience of mental health recovery through participation in Grow's mutual help programs, Joe has been instrumental in the grassroots digital transformation of Grow's service delivery by working directly with service users to improve their ability to use Grow's services. So welcome, Joe. Thanks for joining us. We're really looking forward to hearing what you've got to say. Thank you.
Thanks, Carmel. Hi, everybody. I would just like to start with just giving you an overview of Grow in preparation for the panel discussion, give you an overview of, so you understand sort of what Grow is and its structure, and so then you'll have a better understanding when we come to the panel discussion of what the challenges were. So I'm just going to share my screen. Make sure I share the right one. Okay, how's that? Okay, so people often ask, like, what is Grow? But a better question to ask really is, if I can get my, sorry, I'm having technical, here I am, the technical whiz, and I'm, there we go. Who is Grow? So the reason why that's an important question to ask is because Grow is not a service. Grow is a community, and it's a network of peer-to-peer groups, peer-to-peer mutual support groups. And our Grow program is developed from the lived experience of people who have been working together for about 65 years to help each other maintain, recover, grow their mental well-being. So we always like to make that like we're not a service provider, we're a community of mutual help. So the GROW program is the collective wisdom of more than 65 years of people sharing that, their lived experience. So it started back in 1957, and often if you're sort of looking at GROW, you'll probably see this picture of this gentleman over here with a collar on the right, and people often think that we're a religious organisation, but we're not. The story sort of, GROW started in 1957 in Hurstville, and it was started by a group of people who were really struggling with their mental health, and there wasn't a lot back then, and this particular gentleman is Con Keogh, and he was a young priest who was burning the candle at both ends and taking a lot of like pills to keep himself awake so he could work all the time, and he actually had quite a bad psychotic break and ended up in a mental institution where he had lots of shock therapy and came out of hospital just very broken and very alone and very frightened. And he was taken along to an AA meeting and found that the fellowship was the important thing there, that he really liked the fellowship. So he and some other people that were enjoying that fellowship who had shared experience of mental distress decided to join together and use some of those principles from AA to start working on their mental health. And that's how the first GROW group started. And so you can see on the pictures there some of the old growers from back in the day. And so they called the group Recovery at first, and the idea was to use to the utmost their own personal resources to help themselves and each other. And they committed to identifying, recording and passing on to one another things that help their recovery. So throughout the 60s, they started with that one group, and it started to spread throughout Sydney, regional New South Wales, into Queensland, Victoria, into Adelaide, into prisons and mental health hospitals. It's now in all states and territories. It's in New Zealand, it's in Ireland, it's in the United States. And so it's been operating there since the 60s and 70s. And since 1979, GROW's also operated a residential drug and alcohol rehab program in Sydney, and we also have one in the ACT. So GROW is very much, the organisation exists to support the community. So we have inclusive governance at every level. So the whole way that the service, well, not the service, the organisation is designed is to preserve and promote the life of the community. And there's grower involvement and participation at all levels of decision making. Board members, leadership team and management, they're all from the GROW community wherever possible. For example, in New South Wales, all of the program workers are people who have at some point joined a GROW group because they wanted to work on their mental well-being, have had experience of recovery using the principles and being a member of the GROW community, and then become employed by GROW. And you can see this gentleman here, Dave McLaughlin. He is our recently retired General Manager for New South Wales. He was in the mental health unit here in Lismore when a grower came in to talk to the people in the unit about GROW, and yeah, he was joined a GROW group, recovered his mental health, and up until last year was our regional manager. And yeah, like there's some pictures there, like the national program team, they oversee the program in the community. They're all people from the groups that all get elected to those positions. So the board currently has 3 people who are or have been participants in GROW programs. That's 3 out of 8. So our mission is to enable people and communities to grow, recover and maintain good mental health. And We've got 52 staff over Australia, spread across all the states and territories. The regional and state branches are supported by a very small national office staff. I remember when I first joined, I'd say, oh, can I speak to the HR department? And I'd get the same person. Oh, can I speak to someone in about, policies? And I'd get the same person. So, yeah, it's a very small staff. And we're funded by state health departments, grants and donations. So grow groups are run by members and they are not facilitated by a professional or an expert. The expertise is in the lived experience of the members, and each group will have a volunteer organiser who basically oversees the running in terms of like that sort of servant leadership. They're to make sure that the group runs, not to be the dominant person with all the answers. There's currently over 113 active groups in Australia. In June, 863 people attended a grow group. We have special language groups, so our program's printed in Greek, for example. We have a young adults group, which is slightly modified for 18 to 35-year-olds. And we have 15 e-grow online groups, which we're very grateful that they started back in 2016 with the experiment and getting that system up and running, because that really stood us in good stead when the pandemic hit. We'd been doing it for a while. So grow groups meet weekly for 2 hours. They're led by the members. Each person takes their turn leading the meeting when they feel confident enough to do so. And we follow a very refined group method, which has been refined over the 65 years. It stops it turning into a big free-for-all advice session. It's got very specific sections that serve very specific processes. Seasoned growers show the newer members the ropes, how to use the group method and how to use the program. But even like the newest member has got something that they can contribute and offer and help other people. It's free. There's no diagnosis or referral needed. So a grow group, a person can start going to a grow group today if they want to. And if anybody's interested in joining a grow group, they can look on our website, which is there, www.grow.org.au, where you can find your local face-to-face group, or you can register for an e-grow group. You can ring the 1-800 number if you'd like someone to help you with that process. So it's very community designed. So every 2 months, the grow group members meet to keep developing on the program and contributing their lived experience. It's not like a dead program doctrine. It's actually something that's living and changing as society changes. The program evolves. And we create new literature, and the members can write and contribute and put into that new literature. And we've just published this book this year for our 65th birthday called Growing to Recovery, and it's full of readings and stories by people and their lived experience of mental health and recovery. So who comes to Grow? Well, of the people that did our annual survey, 87.3% have been diagnosed with a mental illness, but about 12.8% hadn't been diagnosed. So it's about 58% men, 58% women, 38% men. We have 1% identified, said they were non-binary, and I guess the resulting lot didn't answer the question. 82% of respondents were born in Australia. 9% of respondents identify as LGBTIQ+. 2% of our members identify as First Nations people. 10% identify as culturally and linguistically diverse, and 30% of the respondents to the survey had been attending the grow groups for less than 2 years. And 6% of them went every week to Grow. So who comes to Grow? Well, you can see that the majority of the age group is sort of in between that sort of 40 to 69, sort of that middle age group. I think that we are sort of expanding with the young adults groups. But I guess, you know, by that stage, people are sort of like, for me, I'd tried everything else. So I was sort of like, well, I better do something. I was 45, I guess, when I first came to Grow. And, you know, people are from all walks of life. There's people who are employed, there's people who are retired, there's people who are not working due to illness or disability, there's people in prison, there's people who are studying, carers, all sorts of, like, it's a very mixed bag, and everyone seems to find that they can relate to other people in the group. It's a wonderful way to break down those barriers across generations and groups. The thing we have in common is our humanity. And we've sort of looked into the effectiveness of that peer-to-peer support in suicide prevention. So of the people answering our survey, about 66 had experienced suicidal thoughts, and that attending Grow had helped a lot of those people to overcome their thoughts of suicide and to stop suicide attempts. And like Grow's we run pretty cheaply. Like the cost of running our groups and the amount of times we can see people per year, and the contact time that we get, you know, it's quite a low cost because we're not having to pay professionals, and you know, the people are learning how to do it for themselves and passing the skills on. So some other interesting data is that 91% of people, of the respondents, found that it helped them cooperate with professional help. 28% no longer needed any professional help, or 69% found it reduced their need for professional help. And 86% of people in the group had at some point been prescribed a medication for their mental health condition. 43% said that it helped them to reduce their need for medication. 83% said that it reduced their need for hospital admission, and 55% of people that come to Grow have actually been hospitalised at some point in their life. So it's saving a lot of cost on the health system when people participate in Grow and their mental health improves. And 79% said that participating had prevented the need for further hospitalisation. So we've got some other programs that have sort of grown out of the Grow program using the principles that have been developed from the lived experience of our members over the years. So we've got one called Get Growing, which is a 10-week program. It's aimed at ages 11 to 17. So it operates in schools. It's peer-to-peer. It's facilitated by a youth worker, but really the idea is to show the group how to use the tools and help them to help each other. It's aligned to the Australian curriculum, delivered mainly in schools. It's evidence-based. And in June, there were 21 courses and 84 people who attended. And the other program that we developed in response to the pandemic, we received some funding from the Queensland government to develop the Growing Resilience program, which was free and it's still there and people can still do it. It's an online program. It runs for 6 weeks. It uses the Grow tools and wisdom. So it's a bit like Grow Light, gives an introduction to some of the ideas that we use in Grow. And it's peer-to-peer, so people create connections from coming along and meeting each other and support each other. And between April and October 2021, 125 people completed the program. 91% of them agreed that it was of value to them and their mental well-being, and 97% would recommend it to their family or friends experiencing mental distress. So that brings me sort of to the end of the overview of Grow and our programs. And I will hand you back to Carmel, who, and then we can talk a bit more about how we cope with the pandemic and moved our services into the digital space during the Q&A session.
Thanks very much, Jo, for that presentation. That was excellent. fascinating history to the organisation, and some great data you have about what Grow is achieving and participating in. So yeah, very impressive, and really interesting that even prior to the pandemic, you'd already moved into the E environment, which yes, clearly did set you up well to cope with the challenges of the pandemic. But you're right, we will get to that more when we're in the panel discussion. So we're now going to hear from Phoebe Connors from Uniting. And Phoebe has been working in the field of psychosocial mental health since 2008. First of all, as a mental health support worker in the HASI program, and then moving into management. And currently Phoebe is the operations manager for psychosocial services at Uniting New South Wales and ACT, and she oversees multiple teams and programs across New South Wales. So Phoebe's passionate about increasing mental health awareness and access to mental health supports. Thanks, Phoebe.
No worries. Thank you, Carmel. I'll just share my screen. And hopefully everybody can see that without any problems. Okay. So firstly, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional custodians on the land on which we meet today and pay my respects to elders past, present. I'm on Darkinjung land, and today I'm going to discuss our mental health services at Uniting.
Phoebe, we can't see your slides.
Oh, you can't see it?
No.
Okay, hang on.
Well, I can't. Maybe others can, but I can't. And
apologies.
I think yeah, have another go and see.
You didn't share properly. Oh, sorry, my it doesn't want to come back on. Apologies. I can see you, but I can't seem to. Hang on. There we go. Let me try again. Can you see that?
We can. Perfect.
Okay. Apologies.
All right. No worries. Thanks.
That's okay. Thank you for letting me know. So yeah, I just want to today I'm just going to give you a brief overview of all the services, a brief overview of the history of Uniting, our mental health services, and our little client segment snapshot, our workforce, our peer workforce, consumer and care advisory groups, a client story, and the focus of the future at Uniting. So the history of Uniting. So we are a part of the Uniting Church in New South Wales and ACT, and we do have a long history of supporting the most disadvantaged and excluded people in New South Wales and the ACT. We provide care and support for people through all ages and stages of life, with a focus on people experiencing disadvantage and vulnerability. We have around 10,000 employees and volunteers supporting over 100,000 people across our services. And our values are really core to everything that we do at Uniting. So we are imaginative, we challenge convention, explore new possibilities, and dare to dream for a better future. We're compassionate, we're nurturing, generous, and thoughtful in our words and deeds. We're respectful, we act with honesty and integrity, and open our hearts to all people without exception. And most of all, we're bold. We face injustice head on and stand up for what is right and true with confidence and strength. And Uniting is well known for operating early learning centres and aged care facilities, but we do also provide mental health services. So within Uniting, our mental health services are known as Uniting Recovery. We are recovery focused, meaning that we walk beside the individual in their recovery journey. We are underpinned by a recovery framework and a trauma-informed approach. We work across the mental health spectrum of interventions, offering early intervention, treatment, psychosocial rehabilitation, and continuing care across the whole lifespan. Our services include psychosocial, primary mental health, and secondary mental health. To expand on that a little bit more, firstly, I'd like to talk about our psychosocial services. So we support clients experiencing severe and persistent mental health issues, and we help them to achieve their goals. We use a recovery-based trauma-informed framework in collaboration with clinical services. So examples of this include Community Living Supports Program, known as CLS, which we operate in the Central Coast and Northern Sydney regions. The Housing and Accommodation Support Initiative, known as HASI, which we operate in the Hunter New England region with offices at Adamstown, Maitland and Taree. And the Housing and Accommodation Support Initiative Plus, known as HASI Plus, which we operate in Western Sydney, and that is a 20-bed mental health live-in rehabilitation facility. Additionally, we also operate the Family and Carer Mental Health Program, which supports the carers of a loved one with a mental illness, and we operate that on the Central Coast, Northern Sydney, Nepean Blue Mountains and Western Sydney regions. Our primary mental health services provide psychological, social and biological supports and treatments for young people and adults in primary care settings. So examples of programs are Headspace and Like Mine. And our secondary mental health services also provide psychological, social and biological supports in a clinical setting, but these services are psychiatry-led and delivered in a community setting, so programs such as the Headspace Early Psychosis program. And as mentioned, Uniting Recovery was previously part of Parramatta Mission, and we transitioned over to Uniting from the 1st of July last year. So we went from one part of the Uniting Church to another part. This is just a current overview of the wide range of mental health services that we offer at Uniting Recovery throughout New South Wales, a mixture of state and federal funding. And this is just a client segment snapshot from 2020 to 2021. And as you can see from the client numbers represented on the slide, 10,743 people were supported through a mental health lens in that period of time. And it's also good to remember that this was when COVID-19 came into our lives, and we had to change our approach with individual and group supports and use innovation to work with our clients and carers on embracing other modes of care delivery, such as telehealth supports. Our workforce is a diverse mixture of clinical and non-clinical professionals, and we have team members who identify as having a lived experience. We also have team members who have commenced as mental health support workers and now work in our primary mental health services. And all our team members are equally valued: psychiatrists, mental health support workers, registered nurses, case managers. Everybody's treated exactly the same way. Talking about members of our team, our peer workers, we have many peer workers in most of our programs in Uniting Recovery, and they're very valued. They have a few different naming conventions, such as mental health peer workers, carer peer workers, and just peer workers, and they bring along their unique lived experience. So in our psychosocial services, such as CLS, HASI Plus and the Family and Carers Mental Health Program, we have mental health peer workers and carer peer workers in every single team. And they have their own clients and carers that they work with, but they are also a lived experience resource for the team. So a good example is in our CLS program, we had a client who was having a really hard time with their depression, and they couldn't get out of bed. And their key worker was trying to work with them and was really struggling, and spoke to the client about maybe having a session with our CLS mental health peer worker who had been through a similar lived experience. So they went ahead, and this proved to be a successful and helpful experience for the client, giving them hope and also knowing that they're not alone. All our peer workers have completed or are completing a certificate in mental health, and they also attend the Mental Health Coordinating Council's Safe Storytelling workshops. We also have numerous advisory groups throughout Uniting Recovery. So our Psychosocial Consumer Advisory Group, Carers Advisory Group, Youth Advisory Committee, and our Friends and Family Committee. Our Psychosocial Consumer Advisory Group is still in its early stages. It has been developed with the mental health peer workers, as the peer workers wanted to increase their professional capacity. So they are all learning how to chair the meetings, take the minutes, set the agendas. There is also a team leader who mentors the group members. There are consumers from each service who are represented in the committee, and they are also a valued part of the group, and they are supported and also mentored by the peer workers. And the aim of the Psychosocial Consumer Advisory Group is to feed improvement and suggestions back into service delivery. Consumers are also compensated for their contribution and time. Then the Carers Advisory Group is very similar, but we use a carers lens, which feeds service delivery suggestions back into the Family and Care and Mental Health Program. And then the Youth Advisory Committee, the YAC, and the Family and Friends Committee also feeds service delivery back into our Headspace program. I just wanted to touch on a client, which is the key of everything that we do. So this is Bill. He has consented for his image and his story to be shared, and he's been a consumer of our CLS program for over 4 years. Bill was referred for chronic paranoid schizophrenia and substance abuse disorder. He was also at risk of losing his tenancy. Over the years with CLS, Bill has been supported across many areas, including medication monitoring, attending social outings, improving physical health, as well as upkeeping the hygiene within the home. Bill has been supported to continue to engage with his mental health support team through attending regular appointments and collecting his medication in a Webster pack. Bill struggles in his life due to his mental illness and drug use, yet he still engages with CLS and his NDIS provider. And despite his adversaries, he continues to take his medication daily and maintain the lease on his home. Recently, CLS visited Bill in his home, where it was observed that he was sleeping on the mattress, with the mattress on his bed with a doona. Prior to this, he had the mattress on the floor with minimal blankets. So this was a positive thing to see. Bill also had his Webster pack out and he was up to date with his medication. And it is important to remember that our consumers are at different stages, both in life and in their capacity and willingness to make changes. With this in mind, it has been great to see that Bill has been able to maintain these positive things in his life. The focus for the future. So Uniting has a 10-year strategy, which includes growing our community services, investing in innovation, research and advocacy, and striving to be an employer of choice, as well as attracting and retaining staff. We have an ambitious goal to double the amount of people that we support to 200,000 by 2032. To wrap up, I would like to thank the Mental Health Coordinating Council for the opportunity to speak about Uniting, and thank you to everyone for your time today.
Thanks very much, Phoebe, for that presentation. It's a really comprehensive range of services that Uniting are involved in. So it was great to hear more about the work of your organisation, particularly the role of peer workers, and also for sharing Bill's story, because I think that helps make it, just that bit more real about what services are doing. So thanks very much. So I'm now going to ask Joe and Sigrid to come back on camera because we're going to move into our panel discussion. But before we do that, I'd like to introduce Sigrid Staender-Challender because we haven't met Sigrid yet. So Sigrid, thanks very much for joining us. Sigrid has lived in Australia for 30 years. She's originally from Germany, where she studied law and worked as a teacher. And 11 years ago, Sigrid sought support from one of the Lismore Grow groups. Sigrid said it took some time to experience the benefits of the Grow program, but eventually she became an organiser, and she's now the chair of the branch program team, New South Wales and ACT. So thank you, Sigrid, for joining us.
Okay.
So welcome.
Yeah, thank you very much for the introduction.
Before we move into the panel discussion, I just want to let the audience know that there's an opportunity for you to also participate by asking questions. So if you've got any questions, please put them in the Q&A function at the bottom of your Zoom screen, and we will do our best to get to those questions. So Sigrid, do you want to? Yep, Sigrid's back. Great.
Yeah.
All right. So we're going to move into the panel discussion now, and I'm going to facilitate this by asking some questions of our panelists, but we very much hope that we get questions from the audience too. So please put those questions in the Q&A function. So Sigrid, can I ask you first, what was your experience of using a grow group during COVID?
Yeah, at first I had to install it. That was a problem. Somebody helped me. I got the information from the grow office, and then a friend helped me. And the experience of using it was not that easy, because maybe you are all computer literate.
Clearly I am not, as I showed at the beginning.
I'm learning as I go and be better now. As it was quite interesting with the Zoom introduction to learn all these little bits, this chat, and I have a look here, chat and share screen, read hands, and what so on. And yeah, it was interesting what to do when it suddenly didn't work. At some stage, I had to use the phone to be involved with the group. But basically, it was wonderful to have it, I have to say, because after, I don't know how long we had nothing, for 2 months or so, we were totally isolated. And suddenly it was possible again to see each other on Zoom. And I can only say it's a similar experience I had with my church group. Suddenly all these little heads appeared on the screen. And it was so beautiful to connect again. And for me, face-to-face is basically better, so to speak, but it is the best choice afterwards. And yes, maybe that's the first question to answer. In Grow, we still have Zoom. We will still have Zoom for the more organizational groups, because that's a long way to travel to Sydney, and it makes it easier. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I think that's right. I think all of us have found that, you know, some meetings have actually worked better online, and we'll continue to do them that way, because travel, time, they can be a lot more efficient. But I agree, face-to-face is usually better. So Sigrid, was it different accessing your Grow group during COVID to accessing other services that you used during COVID?
Other services, you mean in a digital way?
Yes, yes.
Okay. Now, yeah, it was different because you had this people introduction. You saw people on the screen. The normal digital way is you're phoning your bank, you're phoning whoever you want to phone and to know information about. And it's almost the only part I'm using is Grow and the church community at some stage. Yeah.
And so you were utilizing a Grow group prior to COVID, face-to-face, and then you moved into the online arrangement through necessity. So was it a big adjustment for you, this change?
No, yeah, it was an adjustment, just the technical approach, no? The technical approach, and get over your fear, no? Over fear of failure, so to speak. And suddenly it doesn't work. What are you doing then? But when this was solved, and we had a good help in Jo, and she's fantastic in technical knowledge. And I have another friend who knows technical, he knows computer. Also you need help in getting into the Zoom situation. Otherwise, it's now, I don't know, like secondhand, or not secondhand, that's not the word, but it is now easy for me to use. Well,
you're doing very well now.
Thank you.
Okay, so I might bring Jo and Phoebe into the discussion. So how did Grow and Uniting respond to the pandemic and adapt to what was a very challenging environment? Maybe Phoebe first.
Yeah, no problem. So one of the things that we did was we had a business continuity plan in place, which kind of put everything, it was a a living document that changed as things changed with COVID and government guidelines changed, but that helped to guide us and our team through the different stages. We also had lots of regular meetings with our workforce to keep everyone really, really informed as to what was happening, because things did change sometimes on a daily basis. And we did have a lot of programs where we had to maintain face-to-face support with our clientele. And we also had some plans in place if some of those face-to-face teams became unwell. How did we keep service delivery going? So just a really quick example I had was that did happen last Christmas, and one of our teams became well, half the team got COVID, the other half had to go into isolation. So myself and the manager had been working separately, and we jumped back in and we supported those clients and kept that, you know, the service delivery going in that region over the Christmas period. So it was probably really grounding for us to be back out there, seeing the challenges our staff had to go through with all the PPE and everything that they had to go through to continue working with people as a frontline worker.
Yeah, it just reminds us of really what an extraordinary time it was. I mean, I know we're still living with it, but in the very kind of, you know, right at the pointy end of when it was lockdowns and so much happening and so many people unwell, it was a tough time. It really was. And Jo, what about Grow? How did Grow respond to the pandemic?
Well, we had a very short period of time to when we found out that we weren't going to be able to meet face to face, to shift everybody online to Zoom. Luckily, you know, as I mentioned before, we had the experience with the eGrow group, so we were able to draw on those systems and that knowledge that we already had. But and also, I guess in one way, having a small amount of staff was handy in terms of like the communication. You know, it's easier to sort of get the message out to a smaller group. But then what we had to do was we had to do what we've always done, which was drawing upon the lived experience of our members. So the way that things had always happened was that we would talk to the group organisers, who would then communicate with the members in the group. We had very little communication directly with the members of the group. Groups are anonymous and confidential. So we didn't have phone numbers or email addresses or anything for our members. So we really had to draw on the lived experience and the capacities of those volunteers to communicate with the members of their groups. And the groups managed to share their skills and teach each other, which is kind of our whole ethos, I suppose. So the tech savvy members sort of taught the ones that were new users. There were some people that weren't able to make the transition online for one reason or another. And as Sigrid mentioned earlier, you can, people could phone in to the meetings. And so, yeah, it was a pretty full-on pivot that we had to have, but we were really lucky in that we sort of had a model in place.
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. And so how have the adaptations impacted on your model as time has progressed? Have you found that you've been able to adjust and change things, you know, as we move back a bit more into an environment where face-to-face can happen, but online still, you know, useful in some circumstances? Have you found that it's changed on the way through? Maybe Phoebe first.
Yeah, definitely. I think we're now definitely more accepting from our staff to our clients to our carers of online. And now we've got more of that hybrid approach, definitely. I think that's the future going on. We do a mixture in our family and carer program, for instance, of online and face-to-face groups. For some people, online has been fantastic for them, especially if you're time poor, working carer or something. It means you can participate in things, whereas face-to-face, maybe you just couldn't do that before. And also for people that might be living in other parts of the state where they're quite isolated, they can actually participate in things over that digital platform.
Yes, yes, absolutely. I do think online can offer benefits for people, particularly regional or with caring responsibilities, as you say. And Joe, what about from Grow's perspective? Do you think that we're going to be living with a hybrid model of services for the future?
Absolutely. It really offers people a lot more choice. And what we've found now is that we've got many groups where there'll be people sitting in a room doing their Grow group, but they'll also have a digital device there where other members can Zoom into the meeting. And that's really great, because if members are unwell, or if they have mobility issues, or for example, we've got a group in Broken Hill, and at the moment they're Zooming into our Lismore meeting, where we've got really experienced people and a really vibrant group, and they're drawing on the benefit of being able to participate in that group while having a meeting in a venue face-to-face in Broken Hill, but interacting with people online. So they get the benefit of the face-to-face interaction with each other, and they can also tap into the more experienced growers. So we've got that new hybrid model's pretty much here to stay. And it also has been fantastic from a staff point of view, because I can visit my groups in Leeton and Griffith and Nowra and Broken Hill, and I can do that virtually because they've got that technology. I mean, of course, there's been some limitations around, some people don't have devices, some people can't afford the data. So those benefits in terms of accessibility for rural and remote people and less experienced group, we've also had some groups where people haven't been able to participate just because they don't have data. We try and encourage them to phone in. It's not necessarily as effective. So that's, I think it's changed the way that we do things, and more people are interested in having choice about how they're interacting.
Yes, yes, absolutely. And so, Sigrid, you were saying earlier that face-to-face is your preference, but do you feel you get something from engaging digitally? And I guess from a participant's point of view, what's your view about what works best online? What are the things that can make the online experience better?
As an online experience, it's better when you're sick, when you can't move, when you're the weather of living outside Lismore. We have 2 people who are living somewhere outside in the bush, and they can connect with us. And it was only hard again to change from digital to face-to-face, and just to bring in the flood, we had on top of everything for 2 months not a home. We had to look for another home for our group, because the first one was flooded in the main street in Lismore. And then on during this time, it was very important to have Zoom, have the digital way. And now we had to change again face-to-face. It's a personal situation again. Everybody was anxious, or now again face-to-face, or maybe we get COVID, maybe we don't get COVID, but now we are settled again. And as Joe said, it's good to have the hybrid situation, that people who can attend face-to-face, and the others can attend as in a Zoom version. Right. Okay. I can't hear you.
Thanks, Sigrid.
Yeah.
Yes, I think we've all experienced that a sense of having to get used to coming back to things face-to-face, because so much of our lives went online.
Yeah.
I've got a couple of questions in the Q&A. One, is there any chance of small community organisations to develop some form of collaboration with one of your organisations? I guess in a sense, Joe, I don't know whether Grow does that with other organisations. Really, people need to become a grower, do they not?
Well, we are always open to group sponsors. If people would like to open a Grow group in their town, and in fact, the fact that the digital push that we've had makes that even better, because you really do need a seasoned grower to show you the ropes. So if we had an organisation that wanted to sponsor a group, we could zoom in that expertise. So they could be having a face-to-face experience and building those relationships and connections with each other, but get the seasoned knowledge of how to use the program coming in via laptop or digital. So yes, we're very open to those sorts of collaborations, because we can't be everywhere. And yeah, we really, if someone wants to get a grow group up and running, as long as they're happy to come and learn how we do things, which they can do in an online forum, and welcome us in to kind of come and help with the group, world's our oyster, really.
Great, absolutely, thanks. There's another question. What provisions were put in place to maintain trauma-informed practice in the digital space? Phoebe, do you maybe want to respond to that?
Yeah, look, we do have experience running groups prior to COVID, and we used a lot of the same rules around it being a private space. We actually had a clause where we asked people to not record the sessions, to just be mindful, one person speaks at a time. So a lot of the normal group rules that you would see in a lot of group kind of support groups. And we also had a facilitator for all of our sessions. So the facilitator was there to make sure that everything was, conducted in a safe way. Supports could be offered to anybody that may need them. And our groups are closed groups. So we actually know our participants. I suppose that's the other thing. It's not an open group.
Thanks. It was definitely, I think, prior to the pandemic, it did seem to me that services thought that being able to deliver trauma-informed care in a digital environment, and it is challenging, but I think potentially organisations thought it was going to be more challenging than, in fact, what they found. In the end, we all had to adapt because we had no choice. But I think there's been some really innovative ways that services have done that. Jo or Sigrid, did you want to add anything to that? Sigrid, you've got your hand up. Thanks.
Yes, I just wanted to say what Phoebe said. We received, or we learned how there's a Zoom etiquette leaflet running around in Grow, how to behave on Zoom, because that's actually very important to talk, but not talk the whole time. Yeah, and that somebody else is talking as well, as just the balance of communication, that this is needed. And that one is not in, of course, you don't insult people in face-to-face, and you don't do it on the Zoom situation. But we received a special Zoom etiquette leaflet. Maybe Jo knows more about it.
That sounds very useful, I must say.
Yeah.
Because some of the visual cues you miss in an online environment.
Yes,
it's not as
yes.
easy to know when someone wants to talk. So you do need some more rules, in a sense, to make it flow fairly and freely for everyone.
For instance, just a second, sorry, this lower hand, it's not really that well known. Also, we're still learning, you know. I put my hand down. Okay.
Okay. So there's one more comment in the chat, and then I'm going to move to the next part. I think maybe it's more a comment. I attended a clinical session this morning about online psychotherapy. There was a lot of discussion about safety of participants and possible data breaches, confidentiality issues. Does anyone want to comment on how they might have managed that?
Well, we just, at the beginning of each of our meetings, we undertake the Grow commitment, which is all about confidentiality, which is all about, in terms of the people in the meeting agreeing to keep what's happening in the meeting confidential. We also say, please ensure that there's no one there to overhear or oversee what's happening in the meeting, in terms of keeping what's said in the meeting confidential, and of course no recording. But yeah, we certainly had a learning curve, because we started to actually communicate directly with our growers in that digital space and start to get them, they were subscribing to weekly notices that was going out to let them know about opportunities. And this is the first time we'd ever done that, but because before that, the only person that would ever have their contact details would be the group organizer. And so we've had to sort of, you know, really skill up in that area around the management of the personal data. I mean, we don't collect things like diagnoses. We don't make case notes. Nobody's allowed to write down any information about anybody else in a GROW meeting. We don't keep that sort of data. Even with our records of attendance, it's just numbers and a first name with an initial. We don't have any other identifying data. So we're probably a little bit different than a clinical service where you would be kind of collecting that sort of data. So maybe Phoebe's got something better to add.
Thanks, Jo. Phoebe, did you want to add anything to that?
Oh, look, it's definitely something that I've heard before brought up, and it is something that we take quite seriously at Uniting, and we usually have all of our any kind of psychotherapy sessions are usually over Teams, and we would send you a link. And we do have, you know, we do have safeguards around that. We do make sure that, you know, we're not recording your sessions or anything like that, and we do make sure we're in a private space and everything. But it is something that I have heard before, and I think it's still a learning space at this time while things, you know, evolve in the digital landscape.
Yeah. Absolutely, absolutely. And that's probably a very good segue to launch of our digital service delivery guide. But I want to thank our panelists, Jo, Sigrid and Phoebe. Thank you for sharing your experiences, your wisdom. I think that we've learned so much just from this discussion about both how we got through that difficult period of the pandemic and what we continue to do and evolve in terms of service delivery going into the future. So I would now like to introduce Corinne Henderson, who's the Mental Health Coordinating Council's Principal Policy Advisor. And Corinne's going to talk about MHCC's new resource, the Digital Service Delivery Guide, which we developed in response to our members very much saying they needed something like this to assist them and support them in the new way that services are being delivered now. So over to you, Corinne.
Well, thanks very much, Carmel, and thank you to our three guests today for such interesting presentations and a discussion that really I think we could have let go on for a long time. I'll just give you a quick overview about the project that led to the development of the guide. The COVID pandemic has had dramatic and unforeseen impacts on multiple aspects of our lives and general well-being, and not insignificantly on our mental health. And as you heard from Jo, Phoebe and Sigrid today, community managed organisations made a lot of effort to adapt to the demands of the pandemic and the service delivery constraints. And they sought to maximise engagement in a challenging environment to meet people's needs despite the restrictions. And they found innovative and creative ways to develop sustainable adaptations to their modes of delivery. So during these unusual circumstances in 2021, MHCC got together with Jen Chen, consultant lawyer and systemic advocate, and spoke with member organisations to gather information as to the service delivery changes that they had initiated in response to the pandemic. And with some funding from the New South Wales Mental Health Commission, Jen and I set out to investigate what information about policy and procedures, organisational modifications, and workforce supports would be really useful to the sector, and about operational and practice matters that had not been fully planned for when this unexpected service environment emerged. What we heard from members was that where digital service delivery had replaced some more traditional models of care and support, it's really important to consider the particular implications for services when providing mental health and psychosocial supports. And we learned from our research that the development of digital technology is outpacing laws, regulations, and ethical guidelines in some areas relevant to digital services. So the guide we developed in response to our inquiries aims to assist leaders, managers and staff of CMOs who highlighted the specific need for guidance in a digital service delivery context. This guide raises important issues for organizations to consider to ensure that people using community-based services remain at the center of ethical practice. So a bit of a tour around the guide. Now I'm going to try and share my screen. So now I go, yep, share. Okay, so can I move that a little bit? Sorry.
Corinne, you're on mute. I don't know if you mean to be.
Thanks. Sorry, still doing it wrong after all this time. So the guide includes an introduction to the resource. Let me just go into the guide. So when you go onto our website, this is what you'll see. The guide includes an introduction to the resource, and I really recommend that you read the introduction first because it puts the guidebook into context and discusses the principles of practice in a digital service delivery environment. An organization called the E-Mental Health International Collaborative has developed a set of principles which we've included in this resource and we suggest may help direct emerging digital service delivery in relation to ethical frameworks. These principles are relevant for initial work in testing an idea and deciding whether to proceed through to design, development, implementation, ongoing maintenance, and even winding down particular systems. And the collaborative recommended that these principles should be considered as living principles insofar as they're likely to develop as the digital mental health field evolves. And the sections in the guide take into consideration the National Safety and Quality Digital Mental Health Service Standards, which, whilst not mandated, provide a very valuable framework for policy and practice development and quality improvement activities. So the guide presents 10 overarching sections, which includes topics about. So if you look at these sections by clicking on here, you'll see that it includes topics such as governance, leadership and culture, digital inclusion, co-design and collaboration, practice approach to safe and effective care, training and support, informed consent for digital service delivery, privacy and confidentiality, which somebody had mentioned earlier, cybersecurity, outcome evaluation, and most of the sections have multiple subsections, so there's quite a lot of detail in there. We've also included sections with a few tip sheets, so that's in section 10, we have tip sheets for workers, and that's to help them support consumer and carer access to digital services. So that includes check sheets where you can say, well, have I done this? You know, before I start a section, have I done this? Have I checked that? Have I turned this on? Have I turned that off? All of those kind of things. So you can go directly to the sections you're interested in. So you can go, say, for example, to privacy and confidentiality and download the section, and that will bring up the guidebook. Now, the guidebook can be downloaded in its entire form, and you can print that off and read it at your leisure. But each section goes individually into a particular section. And these sections provide an overview of the topic to give you some sort of context. And then what we've got is we've got a number of checklists. So This is to help you think about what you've got and what you haven't got, and you can tick those and or leave them unticked so that you know what you have got and what you haven't got. And you can print that off as you do anything that you've got a PDF document of, so that you could have a record of, well, we need to do these 2 or 3 things, but we've actually got the other things on the checklist. I mean, it's not everything, but it's some things for you to think about. And then at the end of any section, there will be some further resources which have links to assist you do some of your own research around those particular areas. So let me just see if I go back there. So if you want to download the whole guide, you can go there and download the whole guide. Yes, so the tip sheets, let's just go back to the tip sheets just to show you the kind of thing that we've got there. So we've got like a video conferencing check sheet. So setting up your digital space, setting up your workspace, preparing the client. So lots of useful tips and further resources as well. So we're encouraged by the responses we've received so far to the guide, and we hope you'll find this resource useful. And please, this is always a work in progress, and we're happy to receive any feedback that you might like to give me, so that we can update the guide, provide further resources, or think about things that we haven't thought about. We'd love to hear what you have to say. So thank you for your interest and for coming today, and I'll hand you back to Carmel. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Corinne, for both the walk through the guide, but also for the work that you've done on bringing the guide to fruition. It's really, I think, a very valuable resource for the sector, and you've worked with a lot of stakeholders in bringing it to this point, and I congratulate you and others who've been involved in it. And I think while we've got our panelists back, just maybe a quick question. So I know that you were on the reference group assisting Corinne to develop the resource, and do you feel that it does fill some of the gaps that have been identified that could assist your organisation in terms of its online activities?
Yeah, definitely. I think that I really like the tip sheets. I think like the checklist, like the video conferencing one, I think there's some really good things there that sometimes we can also get a bit complacent now working in that digital space. So these are really good signpost moments to kind of make sure that you are doing things properly. I think it's a really great resource.
Thanks, Phoebe.
Yeah,
Jo?
I'd agree with what Phoebe said, and yeah, there's some really thought-provoking kind of points in there that I think it really does give a good sort of process of going through and really checking against, well, are we doing that, and have we got something in place to think about that? And yeah, I found it quite useful in evaluating as a document to help evaluate. And then not only does it help you evaluate, it gives you some ways to move forward with rectifying anywhere that you might feel that you're not up to speed with.
Thanks, Jo. And Sigrid, any final comments from you before we wrap up?
Yeah, it gave me the incentive to look into it. No? I will look into parts of this digital service delivery guide. And yes, I loved the, yeah, I just can say, agree what Jo mentioned. Okay.
Thank you. No, that's great. That's great. There's some wonderful feedback as well in the chat function, in the chat box. So that's great to hear. Good. Look, that brings us to the end of our webinar today. Can I again thank our presenters, Phoebe Connors from Uniting, Jo Young from Grow, Sigrid Staender-Challender, our lived experience expert, and Corinne Henderson from the Mental Health Coordinating Council. Thank you all for what you've shared today, for your time, your expertise. and your wisdom. I think it's been a really fantastic discussion. This is such a challenging area for all of us. We're all adapting and changing and trying to get used to it, and to be able to share the knowledge that all of you hold, I think the audience will find very, very valuable. So thank you very much. Can I just thank our audience for Zooming in today. The webinar will be available on the MHCC website in a few days. The presenters have very kindly given permission to share their slides, so we will circulate those slides. We are sending a short evaluation survey for you to complete after the webinar, so please do that, because we need that to be able to demonstrate to our funding organisations that these things matter and make a difference. And we hope that we see you at another MHCC event. So thanks, everyone. Thanks for attending.